Hey guys, I'm continuing my video series on React Fiber. So we left off with console logging this JSX out, and I implemented some basic create element functionality. So that's what Babel does under the hood with JSX. So if we cut back here, we can see that it got compiled to basically plain JavaScript objects. So the div became like an object with type div and props, and the props it only has a children, which is an array of one element, and the text that's inside it, as we can see here, is just a string. So it got compiled to another element that has a type of text element, and the props children with an empty array and a node value with the given text. So that's all good. But how we can proceed from here? So the thing is that it's quite complicated. I have no idea what would be the best approach to get this, because there's so many pieces missing to get a working fiber algorithm in place. So I was thinking about first getting into just creating some DOM elements, although that's not the appropriate, it might not be the appropriate way from a logical point of view, because if you think that I wrote something like this, that we have React elements, then later the algorithm will create fibers out of them, which is the basic data structure that will hold all the necessary information to determine whether a re-render is needed, or just basically what information you have in your classes and things like that. And then based on the data in the fibers, we create so-called effects, and these effects based on the environment will trigger effects. I mean, the effects in the name, it implies that it's not gonna be pure anymore. So these effects will eventually paint whatever needs to be painted on the given environment. It can be like the DOM elements, so the React DOM will take over, or the React Native renderer, for example, if you're on React Native. So what we're doing right now is so we have the React element, right? So we have the create element, we have the JSX, so Babel transpires it. But there's so many things to do to get the actual fiber structure, not to say to have the effects. So this is called rendering phase, and this is called the painting phase. But I just want to jump onto the painting phase, just to be able to create some DOM elements and see how you can get from JSX to do something in the browser. And yeah, so that's gonna be the first thing that I'm gonna do, and probably it's gonna take quite a long time till we can get back to this element creation. And by element I mean DOM elements. Sorry, I should come up with a more distinguishable term. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do now. So let's get into it. So this is basically calling create React element and returns an object. So what we can do is we can save it into a variable, like element equals, we can get this out here. If we want, we can console log the element. Remind me later, please. So it holds the same result, as we can see. Okay, and yeah, that's important, because with React you never write HTML. Everything is happening through JavaScript, which is good, because you're gonna get better at JavaScript. You have to, and everything is JavaScript. It's not like enhancing HTML, it's pure JavaScript. So okay, how we can do that? So we definitely need an entry point, and React need an entry point as well, right? And that entry point is, if you remember, the React API is something like that you have the React DOM package with a render function, and this render function takes a React some JSX, some arbitrary JSX, and a native DOM element, which is document get element by ID. And in our case, our server creates a template with a div element with an ID of root. This is here, so that's gonna get returned, and we can see this here. Okay, so we can grab this element by this query, and I can do something like this. So that's the API of React DOM. So that's how you start basically every application. It can be rendered, it can be rendered to string if it's on the server, or it can be hydrate if you're using isomorphic apps. But basically the point is the same, that you need some HTML element to render content into it with JavaScript. So obviously that's nowhere. We don't have a React DOM package. Neither we will have, because I'm not gonna make that harsh distinction between React and React DOM. Maybe at the end of the video series we can draw a line where it's the responsibility of React and where is the responsibility of React DOM starts. But I think that would be too many information. So we have root. I can console log things out. Yeah, so that's the div element. And if we wanna get some div into it, or basically any other element, what we have to do is, let's do, I don't know, let's be fancy and do an article. I think there's such a thing. Document. Okay, and what I can do now with this article, I can root append child, and I can do article. So if I refresh it, there's an article here. Pretty good. So that's what we wanna generalize, basically. And also we have props, so they might not sit on their own. They have props which somehow modify their behavior. Okay, so what we can do is we can create a function which is create DOM element, and we have type on the React element and props. Now the thing is that, as I said here in line 3, when you will paint, we'll come to the actual painting later. So, and by the way, that's actually what a virtual DOM is, right? So the virtual DOM is like every calculation happens here and not directly to the DOM. So it's just like, it was such a fancy term back in, I don't know, maybe even when I started looking into React in the first time, 2016, everyone's talking about how good like virtual DOM is, and yeah, I mean, no one really digged into what virtual DOM is. It's just like so fast and things like that. But virtual DOM is nothing fancy, nothing complicated. It's just an abstraction over the React DOM. In Fiber's case, it's just the Fiber data structure and some algorithm that determines what you need to do, and then creating effects, and these effects will be eventually flushed out as DOM paintings in the end. So create DOM element, we need the type and we need the props, and the React elements are basically just these two properties. But we are not, when we're doing the actual DOM rendering, like painting, we are not interacting with React elements, we're interacting with Fiber. But Fiber has these two fields as data on it. So if you have a Fiber data structure, and we will obviously work with Fibers later on, but in some previous video I showed what kind of fields it have. it had. So it has type and props as well, and these are just copied from the React element. So what it means is that if I pass a fiber here to this function later on, or rather I would say the reconciliation algorithm calls this create DOM element, and with a fiber it will be able to have the type and the props out of it. So this is gonna be the two things that that we're gonna work with. But since elements have these two properties, I can test it with React elements as well. I don't need fibers for that. Okay, so what I want to do is so the JS DOM API differentiates between create element and create text node or something like that. So I have text document create text node, yes. So if I do something like SD, like here, and I switch the article back to div, I can do root append child div and div append child text. And if everything goes well, so for example this should produce the same HTML structure that I was expecting from this JSX. Yeah, so we can see that if I get here, and inside the root we have a div with SD. So that's actually HTML, and this is just pure JavaScript, which has nothing to do with HTML except it looks like HTML. Okay, so create text node is for text elements, and create element is for every other thing, which can be translated into DOM elements. And we assume now, for the sake of simplicity, that we don't have any custom React components. So everything is just DOM elements representation. So what can we do is if type, and if you go to the console, you can see that the type is div, but for the text, the type is text element. So what we can do if type equals text underscore element, then return document create text node, right, with the props node value, I guess. Props, so that's the element, props node value, yes. That's what we have to pass on to it. Actually, let's just try it out. So what if I save it, const example create DOM element, and we have this element. So element props children, so element props children at the 0th index. So that's like again a React element I'm grabbing. That's how we can traverse the element structure, and that's how we will when we will create fibers out of React elements. So what I can do is I can console log the example now, and there you go, you have it. You got the DOM element. Oh, I mean, yeah, this is the actual DOM element which was created, which is good. So that's if the type is text element. And then every other case, what we want to do is simply just return create DOM element. Create document create element with basically just type. So if I change it to simply element. I should have a div back. Yeah, I have a div back. I hope it's clear what it does. So what it does is create DOM element. It takes a fiber data structure and returns HTML element. Yes. Okay, now comes the interesting part. So I don't wanna modify the DOM structure, so I get rid of everything here. Now comes the hard part, because obviously, as we know, JSX can have props, like the most basic stuffs like onClick, and you can attach event listeners where you can have the event. You can just console log out the event. Okay, but we have done nothing with the event so far, so we need to fix these things. So how to fix this thing is yeah, so we need a reference to the element itself. And before we return it, we need to modify it somehow. OBS3. Okay. So there are a few cases what we need to be aware of in the case of native DOM elements. You can have event listeners. You can have styles. You can have children. Everything what I just wrote here is on props. So the children is gonna be props. The style is gonna be props. Event listener is gonna be props. Okay, and I just wanna make a note that although I know that React doesn't attach individual event listeners to individual DOM elements, it's a lot more sophisticated than that, and we will do something similar in the end, but for, again, simplicity reasons, I'm just going to go with the approach that we're going to attach event listeners directly to the DOM elements. So yeah, these are the cases that we need to cover. Because so why we need to cover? Because children represents children, right? So in the element structure, the fiber structure, and eventually in the DOM structure as well. So we can't really do anything with the children. So if there is a children among the prop, we need to get rid of it. Styles is a bit different, because if you think, if you work with React and you attach styles here, it's something like, and you can have text align, for example, text align, center, but it will need some formatting, so we need to be aware of that. And onClick, if you remember that the native event names are somewhat different. So for example, the native event name is click, whereas React uses onClick. So we need to be aware of these things. So let's start with the event listeners. Okay, so how we get to it is you have the props. So we have the props, but the problem is that we can't treat the prop as an array simply because the props is not an array. It's an object. So, but there is a way to. We're not using any Lodash, Lambda, or something like that. So we just purely rely on JavaScript. So, but there is a way to make it kind of work like an array, and that is that we're gonna grab the field names of the object and the object keys, if you know what it does, if you need to pass an object there, and it will return an array with strings that represents the names of the object fields. So in our case, if let's assume this case, we will return an array of style and onClick. That's what it's gonna return, and now we can call filter on it. And what we want to do is we want to filter out the event listeners, and all event listeners, so we can create a function, not here but here, so we can create is event listener. So all it does is it's gonna grab the prop, and we can check if prop, and there if it's a string, like on a string you have starts with function, and if it starts with on, then we know that's an event listener. So we can pass this function to the filter. So if it is an event listener, then what we can do is we can do some side effects, and what I want to call this is just gonna be add event listener, and for that we need to pass the actual DOM element, and I'm not gonna call it DOM element because later on with the fiber naming conventions, DOM elements and every DOM elements or class instances will have the name of state nodes, but this in case our state node is a DOM element, but let's just stick with this. So it's state node, and we will need all the props, and this function will be carried and will return one prop. So remember, it's filtered, so when we get here, every prop that's gonna iterate through will be an event listener. So what we can do is we can have state node, which is a DOM element, and on DOM elements we have the add event listener function. And prop is some event listener. So for example, onClick. So we need to translate onClick onto the native counterpart, which is prop, and it's a string. So on strings, you remember, on strings you have the substring method, and the substring method basically gets the substring of the given index, so we need 2. So if we just think about it now, from onClick we got to just simply click, and now we need to do is to lower case. So now we are to click, and that's what we wanted, and now we need to pass the function onto it, and the function is just simply props, because we passed the whole props object, and we need to look up the key with the prop. So we have the whole props object, and we just need to grab the onClick. So that's how we add an event listener. And we need to have this and put it there. So that's how we add an event listener. Okay. Yeah, I think it can work. Let's just try it out. So let's create an element. Do we have an element? Yeah, we have an element. Let's create a div with create DOM element and with the JSX element, and let root append child div. So if I refresh it, I just wanna give it active append child. I just want to give it text so it will be visible. Document create node, create text node, click on me. Yeah, nothing happens, which is not good. Create an element. Sorry, it's actually need to be called with the element and the props, and it will be carried over. Okay, so what it does, it just console logs the event. Okay, seems it works. Okay, so that's for that video, and I'm gonna continue with the styles next time. Thank you, see you guys.